Depending on who you believe, the number of times you can play a vinyl record before it gets worn out is anywhere between 5 and 3,000.
Kids are going to buy these cruddy turntables. They'll play Dark Side of the Moon 5 times, and then the grooves will all be chewed up, and they'll say, this is a stupid hobby. Why did I get into this?
Part of this record's been test played over 3,000 times. This one's brand new. Listen to it. Racing with the moon. Now, listen to and compare this record that's been played over 3,000 times. Racing with the moon. Sounds great, doesn't it?
So while the experts are still trying to figure that one out, I thought I'd take a stab at answering a related question, and that is, how many times you can play a cassette tape before it gets worn out? That question was once so pertinent that it led to the creation of an ad campaign that the company Maxell is still using as their logo today, over 40 years later.
The usual, sir?
Please.
Even after 500 plays, our high-fidelity tape still delivers high fidelity.
However, Philips, who invented the cassette tape, would beg to differ. All the way back in 1966, they ran an ad comparing the cassette tape to the 8-track tape, and they claimed that while an 8-track tape only lasts for 500 hours of playing time, a cassette tape could last for 1,500 hours of playing time. That brings up a question of semantics, and that is, what do you consider to be one play of a cassette tape? Is it playing both sides of an album, which would actually run the tape past the heads of the machine twice? Or is it running the tape across the heads of the machine once, especially with a single, which repeats the same program on both sides? I'm going to take the latter approach of considering every time the tape passes by the heads of the machine to be one play. So in that Philips ad where they claimed the cassette tape can last for 1,500 hours of playing time, back then the longest length of cassette tape you can get was 90 minutes, which is 45 minutes per side. And if you do the math, that equals playing the tape 2,000 times. I wish I had the time to verify Philips' claim of a tape life of 1,500 hours, but that would take over 2 months. So I'm going to speed up the process quite drastically by using this 10-minute tape, which is 5 minutes per side. It says it's for personal computers, but it can be used for audio recordings as well. This is a laser cassette tape made by Swire Magnetics, and it's one of those cool looking and rather collectible reel-to-reel style cassette tapes. So I'm going to unwrap it right now live on camera. And there we go. That is a very nice looking tape. Oh, it appears to be leaderless too, because that's all the way at the end, and that's already at the magnetic tape. It's a nice dark chocolate brown, standard type 1 ferric tape. So I'm going to use this for my test. And even though this isn't a Maxell tape, I'm going to use the same piece of music that Maxell used in their ad, Ride of the Valkyries, and conveniently YouTube has a royalty-free version of it in their audio library. Now I'm ready to make my recording. Even though this tape does not have a leader, I queued it up a couple seconds just to leave a little bit of blank tape at the beginning. And yes, you can see Maxell is still using that man in the chair logo, even on their recordable CDs. So I'll put that into my CD player. And I'm not going to touch the bias or level calibration controls. I just left them at their center detent positions. All I did was adjust the input level so that the very highest peak of the recording is at about +3 on the meter. And because this is a 3-head deck, that means the recording will also count as the first playback of the tape, because it plays the tape at the same time it's recording it. So here we go. Now I'm going to record the other side of the tape, and this time I'm going to use Dolby B noise reduction, because the first time I did not use any Dolby noise reduction. And I'm also going to tweak up the recording level calibration a little bit, because I noticed that while I adjusted the input level from the CD player to peak at +3, when I was recording and monitoring the recording on the tape, it only went up to +1. So I just tweaked up the recording level a little bit to leave the bias alone, and this time I'm using Dolby B noise reduction. Now that we've recorded both sides of the tape, instead of continuing the test on my Denon deck, I'm going to use something far more pedestrian. This 1990 Emerson auto reverse boombox, which you can see is partly taken apart because I modified it to add a counter. I noticed the mechanism has this metal tab here, and every time it switches to the B side of the tape, that tab sticks out. So I put this switch right against the tab so that every time it switches to the B side of the tape, as indicated by this LED, it'll trigger the switch. However, when it switches back to the first side, it will not trigger the switch because it just releases it. So whatever this counter reads, I'll have to double it. So for example, I'll reset it, and then I'll make it think it's switching sides. And you can see that counted 1. Switch sides again. Does not increase the counter. Switch sides to the other side again. It increases. So every other time it switches sides, the counter goes up by 1. So whatever reading I get, I'll double it, and that'll be the number of times this mechanism has played the tape. So I queued up the counter to 1, and here we go with the first play of the tape on the Emerson boombox. I'm now at the halfway point of the first 500 plays. Remember, you have to double the number on that counter, so that's about 250 plays right now. And at least through the boombox speakers, still sounds fine. There, it just completed 500 plays, so I'm going to stop the tape. Here is the cassette tape after being played 500 times on that cheap Emerson boombox. And after looking at this closer, I realized it actually does have a leader, but is so short it never gets exposed. It only goes up to there. And I've already played this on my Denon deck and recorded it into the computer, so I'll put together a montage later in the video. But right now, after 500 plays, I did not notice any significant degradation of the audio quality, so I'm going to keep going. But first I'm going to clean the tape head using isopropyl alcohol to see if I get any oxide coming off of it. And then I'm going to clean the pinch rollers using window cleaner, which is a trick I learned from Dr. Cassette, because window cleaner is strong enough to clean the rubber pinch rollers, but not so strong like alcohol that it starts to eat the rubber. So it's safer to clean pinch rollers using window cleaner. So I just gave the tape head a good scrub. Maybe just a little bit of dirt came off, because right there in the middle is where I use to scrub it. But no big chunks of oxide or anything coming off. So that's pretty good. Oops, I just realized that moving that mechanism back and forth to clean the pinch rollers bumped up the counter by a few digits. Okay, we're ready to go for the next 500 plays of this cassette tape. So I'll just hit play, and there it goes. This tape has now been played over 1,000 times, and both the tape itself and this cheap boombox I'm using to play it are still going strong, but I'm going to stop it. Remember, you have to double the number indicated on the counter. So here is the laser cassette tape after it has been played over 1,000 times on a cheap Emerson boombox with a Tanishin mechanism. Still looks fine. It's not shedding oxide or getting crinkled up or anything like that. And I could keep going with this experiment until it starts to show obvious signs of degradation, but this cassette is too good looking and too valuable for me to ruin it like that. So I'm going to stop now after 1,000 plays because I have another test I want to do of this. And now the comparisons you've been waiting for. First, I'll start off with just the background level of hiss on the tape on the side that I recorded without any Dolby noise reduction. I'll play 5 seconds each of the hiss on the first play, on the 500th play, and after 1,000 plays. Next, I'll play the last 20 seconds of the recording on the side that was recorded with Dolby B noise reduction, which will make any differences more obvious because if there's any loss of level or high frequency response, the Dolby decoding will start to mistrack and you'll be able to hear that. So this will be the last 20 seconds of the first play with Dolby, the 500th play with Dolby, and after 1,000 plays of Dolby. And now for the money shot, I'll just take a brief snippet of the big finish of this recording as heard on the first play, on the 500th play, and after 1,000 plays. I know my phrasing of that is inconsistent, but for some reason I can't say 1,000th without it sounding stupid. 1,000th, 1,000th, 1,000th. And now here's cleaning the tape head after it's played the tape 1,000 times to see if any more oxide comes off. And there is the side I used to clean the tape head, and I don't see any dirt on it. So clearly the tape was not shedding oxide. If you're of a certain age, you may remember another famous ad campaign from the 70s and 80s involving cassette tapes.
Can the amplified voice of Ella Fitzgerald shatter this glass? Believe it. Ella Fitzgerald on Memorex cassette tape with MRX2 oxide. Can Memorex shatter the glass? Now we ask, is it live or is it Memorex?
And those ads were so popular that they were even spoofed on the Johnny Carson show.
It's the famous singer, Ella Fitzgerald.
Ella Fitzgerald. Gee, I was just listening to her on my Memorex tape recorder.
Hi, Mr. Wilson.
Well,
Unfortunately, Ella Fitzgerald is no longer with us, and I don't feel like having broken shards of wine glasses flying around my workshop. So instead I'm going to do some comparisons between a direct from CD recording of some pieces of very dynamic music and those same pieces of music as recorded onto and played back from this laser cassette tape that has been run through a machine 1,000 times. In preparation for that, I've already bulk erased this tape and I'm going to calibrate it on my Denon deck to get the best possible recording. First I'll calibrate the level with a 400 Hz tone at 0 dB. This is direct from the source. Now I'll start recording it to tape and see how much adjustment I need to bring it up to 0 dB. Right about there. So we did need to raise the level a little bit to match between the source and the tape. Now calibrating the bias with a 10 kHz tone at minus 15 dB. This is from the source. Now that is from the tape, so we don't really need to adjust the bias that much. Maybe just a little bit of a tweak towards negative bias, and we're exactly where it should be. And I will make these recordings using Dolby C noise reduction.
We will now pause for several seconds of fine music. We will now pause for several seconds of fine music.
This is the end of the orientation. We hope you've enjoyed getting acquainted with your new premium quality audio system. This is the end of the orientation. We hope you've enjoyed getting acquainted with your new premium quality audio system.
I think that sounds phenomenal for a standard ferric tape. And you have to remember, as nice as this cassette looks and as valuable as these tapes are on the collector's market, Laser was a very cheap brand. It was made by Swire Magnetics in Hong Kong, And if you look that up on the tape forums, they do not have a very good reputation. And this wasn't even meant to record music. It was only meant to record computer programs. So I'm sure if I used an actual audio grade tape, it would do even better than this. So I hope this video has helped to dispel some of the popular myths about cassette tapes being prone to damage and degradation and having poor sound quality. You have to remember that reputation got established back in the 70s and 80s and 90s when a lot of people were playing cassette tapes in their car, where the tape gets exposed to severe extremes of temperature and humidity, especially before air conditioning was common in vehicles, and back when a lot of people used to smoke in their car too. So if you combine the condensation of a hot, humid day with the tar-like nicotine residue on the capstan and pinch roller of a car stereo cassette player, which nobody ever cleaned, it's no wonder cassette tapes, and for that matter 8-track tapes, tended to get tangled up and eaten, and often thrown out the car window onto the side of the road. But when played indoors under relatively stable temperature and humidity and used on good quality and properly maintained equipment, cassette tapes are actually surprisingly durable, and they can deliver astonishingly good sound quality.